Hey everyone, welcome to live number two. Two lives in 48 hours, killing it. Today's live will be with Mariah Bailey, who I can give you a little bit of a backstory as we're waiting for her. Hi, GeoPress Juice. Mariah used to be my boss at a startup juice company, and now Mariah is a yoga instructor. She's killing it. She also does energy healing, and that really doesn't do her justice. She's just really multifaceted, and she is a friend of mine, and she is one of the few people in my life who I've had some really deep conversations with, and I really enjoy them every time. So let me bring her on. Waiting for Mariah. This is going so much smoother than yesterday.
Oh,
Hi.
hi.
How are
Okay,
you?
I'm good. How are you doing? Let me figure out if I can get all of this,
Yeah, you're
situated, and
fine.
then.
Take your time. I was just telling the people that you used to be my boss.
Oh yeah,
And yeah,
that is so not even like a thing in my mind anymore.
it's so weird to even say that. I'm like,
Yeah,
yeah, that like I was kind of thinking about how we met, and then I was like, oh yeah, you hired me, and then now we're so far long like down the road.
yeah,
Like, what is that?
yeah. What is that?
So I was just telling everybody that you own a juice company, you are a yoga instructor, you do energy healing. What else have I left out besides that you're just an awesome human? But how do you describe the work that you do to people?
Well, I think it kind of comes down to like the very topic of this whole thing. I think it comes down to energy, and
Yeah.
I have kind of found a way, if you will. That's a really short way to put it, to kind of read and understand the subtle energies that run through everything, not just people, but everything in existence. And so I use that in so many of the things that I do, whether it's actual energy work or teaching yoga, or even when it comes to working with the juice company too, and all of these sort of holistic-esque things, I use it in all of it. So
Yeah, that's amazing. So a question that I have for you, I have a couple, but one of them is that just from like a general perspective, starting to understand energy. So maybe we can think of it as, say you meet somebody and they have a good vibe. They just have a good
yeah.
energy. Is there an explanation behind that besides just that maybe they're positive or something like that? Have you noticed patterns with the good vibe thing? It's obviously a little overused, but what's
Yeah.
the, what's the commonality when there is a good vibe?
Yeah. So that's a good question, and I can't. I would be like completely remiss if I did not say Tesla's like most famous quote, which is
Oh
like,
yeah.
if you want to understand the universe, you have to start thinking in terms of energy and frequency and vibration. And so, in delving into that, and in my whole growth and understanding of all of these subtle energies that reside in everything, when you start to pick up on energy, you then start to kind of tune into what the frequency of the energy is.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a plethora of reasons why somebody has a high frequency, or I use that term lightly, or just a different frequency than somebody
Okay.
else. And really, so much of it, really what it comes down to is love. And love that they have in their heart, which everybody has. But a lot of times, the best way to access that is by doing other high frequency things, like eating the right foods and having gratitude, and taking yoga, or doing these sort of high frequency things that. And then, of course, there's something to be said about someone who was birthed through the womb as a high frequency being that just has a vibe about them that is almost undescribable in some ways, but could be because of many things. But I would say, to wrap up that question, really, the biggest thing is just somebody who walks with love in their heart and who has shed some layers enough to just kind of exude love. So,
Yeah. Wow. I like that you said the shed the layers thing, because that reminds me of this theme lately for me that's been, in Ayurveda, like you definitely know this, but
yeah.
just the unaccumulating, the first like step towards unwellness is accumulation. And so
Yes.
just
Yes.
shedding the layers and like unaccumulating has been such an easy concept for me to wrap my mind around, because it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I think I know how to do that. Because I think a lot of people get stuck on like, I don't know what to do to be good vibe, or I don't know how to
Yes.
get better vibe. And it's like, well, you know how to get rid of stuff. Get rid of your baggage mentally and your body, right? Like obviously you through teaching yoga, I mean, amongst a ton of other things, you teach people how to get rid of the stiffness, for lack of a fancy way to say it. And that's,
Mm-hmm.
as you've taught me, that's, if you're stiff in your body, you're stiff in your mind. I know you tell me that all the time.
Yeah.
But so like, I know that a lot of my, friends and people are super active. They're either in CrossFit or they're, athletes. You obviously still work with athletes.
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing I'd like to get into is just, we both were athletes before. You were a swimmer. I
Mm-hmm.
was a volleyball player, and there's obviously a mindset in sports
Totally.
that is definitely the opposite in many ways of yoga and mindfulness. So how,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of a two-part question. So what brought you to making that switch over to a different realm? And like, what's life like on the other side of that? Like, what have you looking back, what do you realize was really limiting you, like being in
For
that
sure.
way of life?
Yeah. So like if you could have asked one question that sums up like what my vocation is in this world, is it's this topic right here.
Yeah.
So yeah, and just well, I want to go back to something you said earlier, is that you started to realize that it was like, kind of the shedding of everything, and the how to get rid of things. And
Mm-hmm.
really what this whole journey about, and what I is about, and I feel like the journey of our souls and humanity is about, is really the undoing, right? It's like undoing everything that we've ever learned to come back to source and come back to our, to our center. And with athletics in particular, there is this, all of these things that start to compound, and is such in everyday life, but especially in athletics, because your sport, whether or not you are famous for it or not, or even if you're not a college athlete, but you're just an athlete in general, it starts to become who you are, right? And it
Mm-hmm.
starts to,
Yeah.
and then all of these things, like how do I look? I look strong, I look fit. It starts to, and then like I have to be fast, and or all of these things that start to compound on, like, oh, that's Mariah the swimmer, oh, that's Jess the volleyball player, oh, and it, what happens is you start to build the layers. The layers begin to build. And but that does not mean that you have to discard all of that in order to be, you can be both. You can be a great athlete and you can be a yogi at the same time. And the
Mm-hmm.
way in which I have found is the best way to blend those two worlds is really having an in-depth understanding of energy. And to put it not too scientifically, or not to get into in depth, it's like in yoga we have this term, it's called prana. It's just another word for energy. And the movement of energy is called pranayama. And so I have always said that energy needs two things. It needs a vehicle and it needs a roadway. And so in order for life to move through us fully, we need to learn how to breathe, and we need to learn how to move consciously. And in bridging the world of athletics and spirituality, and such as everything, there's like kind of three components, right? There's the physical component, then there's the mental component, and then there's the emotional component. And
Mm-hmm.
speaking strictly physically, it's like just getting, we're very attached to our physical bodies, especially as athletes. So for me, this started really with understanding the physical a little bit more in depth, and realizing that like that these layers that I've put upon myself, whether it was muscle or whether it was mental, aren't bad. It's just that there's more than that. There's more
Mm-hmm.
than that. And I'm not confined to these layers. They can still be a part of me, but it's not who I am. So
Yep.
in the blending of these two, being able to blend these two was really understanding how energy moves through the physical body, and then how it then affects the mental body. And it was here, I did go through a phase where I discarded athletics. I was like, oh my gosh, it was such a masculine thing for me to do. And I put on all these layers, and I thought I had to be this Olympic athlete in order to be somebody. And I don't want anything to do with that. And I've come to a much better balance with that. There's not a day that goes by that I didn't wish I had this understanding I have now with athletics. I could have brought my athletic career and world to a different level. So,
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's good. So something that I think is like being married to a CrossFit coach and like just being very immersed in our CrossFit gym, I'm around a bunch of amazing people all the time that are, well, first of all, the mindsets vary a lot, right? From full competitive mode with no mindfulness to everything in between to like probably me sometimes in the corner stretching for a long time. So something like, I'm wondering what somebody that goes in the gym and basically trains and trains and trains and tightens and tightens and tightens, what can be a first step for them? I mean, I guess the short answer could be start to stretch more, but what's, maybe walk that person through the mindset shift of why they need to start like well, they don't need to, hopefully they feel a pull to it, like they're like, hey, I don't feel great, I'm looking to do something different. What's the, maybe walk them through what the next step would be and then why that would be helpful to them, because to some people just saying you'll be more flexible is like not reason enough. They just want, you know what I mean? So, and I know that you're like, you're the girl for this. So, and you work with athletes. So how does that conversation normally go for you?
So, first and foremost, like the last thing I would ever want to do is tell somebody to not do their sport or to not. So if any of your CrossFitter people are listening to this, like this is only to enhance your CrossFit, not take it away. But the first thing is to have an understanding of how the mind and the body are connected. And you said this earlier, when there's tightness in the body, there's tightness in the mind. And it's not that working out is bad. In fact, for some people, like it's a lifesaver, right? And so, but what can happen is it can, especially if we're in very rigorous training like CrossFit is, it can tighten us. And while we build the strength, it can tighten us up. And so what happens then is when we become too tight and rigid in the body, it actually can then negatively impact the CrossFit down the line, right? Because then you're getting injured, you're not gaining what you want to gain, it's inhibiting you. So while you said, it might be as basic as stretching, I would say there's two components, stretching and the breath. And what people will find is, like I said earlier, the energy needs a vehicle and a roadway. So as you open up the tight spots of our body, whenever we're tight, this is where dis-ease begins in any form. So as we open up the areas of our body and then we send the breath through them, it's just an absolute lifesaver. And so it then what it does is it opens up and energy runs through you. And just think of an athlete. If you have more energy, how much that can benefit you. Or if you have more accessible energy, how much that can benefit you. So the simple answer to your question is before or after or both of like a CrossFit workout, for example, taking 15 minutes to do stretching, namely yoga postures, because they are postures for a reason, and then linking it with a deep breath. And that's a whole nother topic. Most of us don't even know how to breathe. And this is a big vocation of mine also, teaching people how to breathe, but then linking it with the breath. And you will feel the difference in you. It literally stops dis-ease, which is injury, in its tracks. It really does.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I totally agree. And you know this, but you have been a major, influence on me implementing it more. I mean, I definitely was the anti-stretcher at one point. Maybe rewind like 10 years ago, I would take off for like a 5 or 10 mile run. I would never stretch. It was 0% of my day. And I look back and I'm like, man, how did my body do that? I really don't know. Well, it's why I've had injuries. That's what happened. You know what I mean? It's why I've encountered those obstacles, is because I didn't take care of my body for a while. So you say that, yoga, this is a rabbit hole, but yoga poses and postures have, there's geometry involved, right? There's sacred geometry involved.
So glad you asked it.
Can you, and your juice company is called Geo Juice. I mean, it's just, the geometry thing is far reaching, but can you maybe give somebody an idea? Is it as simple as the energy flow through the body? And I know that you've mentioned to me before, locking out your joints is not ideal because it blocks energy. I think you've said something similar to that. So what is it about the different yoga poses, if there is a way to describe it, that makes them significant?
it's funny because I remember a while, like years ago, having to sit and like really think about how I would answer this question because a lot of it is an experience. But I'm
Okay.
going to give you like a really overarching view, and then I would encourage anybody who's listening to delve deeper into this.
Yeah.
And so, you know, for the subtle energies that I was talking about at the beginning of this is something that the yogis and the sages and scientists and mathematicians have studied for centuries. And namely, you know, some of the most well-known being Plato or being Leonardo da Vinci. And if you think that it's a little bit of a strange coincidence that they were also so very much into geometry. There's a reason for that. And you know, to put it very bluntly and very short, and this is where you'll have to just dive down the rabbit hole, essentially all of our physical existence can be broken down into 5 geometric shapes. And Plato knew this, and he called them the Platonic solids. The study of the Platonic solids opens up so many doors, but essentially what we're doing when we're taking yoga posture is we're recreating the geometric shapes in our physical form. And so as we then recreate the very thing that we are made of, or we connect with in that way the very thing that we are made of, we're connecting with creator and the creation, right? So that's very powerful. And so as you take then you can know that, and you can know this super philosophical reason and geometry and all that stuff, but then if you don't even know or care or believe that, it doesn't matter, because the physical component of these yoga postures, it's just the way in which you go into a standard downward dog, which most people know. You think about the stretching that's happening literally from the Achilles heel to the wrists, and we're most importantly lengthening out the spine, which is how energy travels. And so I always say a compressed spine is a depressed mind. And so if you can, after a workout, for example, take yoga postures that are lengthening the spine, then you link it with the breath. And then at the same time, whether you give a shit or not, you're creating the very shapes that we are all made of. It's here this is why yoga is so powerful, and it's why it's more powerful than just stretching, and yet nobody seems to really be able to point their finger to why, right? But we know why, and the yogis and the sages know why. So if you care to know why, that's why. If not, just stretch because it's good for you.
Oh my gosh. It's for me, and maybe you can relate, it's been such an evolution of just seeing, like, honestly, I saw yoga as something that people that didn't have the hard work ethic, which is such a masculine
Totally.
thought to me, I was like, that's like lazy people stuff. I have to go train.
Yes.
Like, it's embarrassing to share that now because of how I look at yoga, but and then like to think how far I've progressed. And you definitely, if you were a college athlete, like you had a little bit of that, of like there's like practice, and then there's like resting, and yoga is like in the resting category,
right?
You know, that's obviously prior thinking, but that's amazing. I marvel at just like the how there's just more to yoga. There's just
there
so much
is
more.
and Jess, I'm with you. Like I remember, and I hope my swim coach is listening to this, Pablo. If you are, I hope you are. He used to try to make us do yoga postures, like just basic yoga postures, as part of recovery. And I used to like hate it. First of all, I was like, what is this? And then when I would see a yoga class going on, I'd be like, oh, that's cute. How sweet.
Yeah.
You know, like how sweet they are. And boy, like the first time I stepped to the mat, did I get my shit rocked. And it's because you realize that it's like such an inward journey too. And for the athletes out there listening to this, if you hate yoga, I get it. I really get it. And I've been there. We've been there, Jess, you know, and part of why we hate it is because it forces us to slow down. And that is not an athlete mentality, right? Like we are go, go, go. That's what is indoctrinated. It's what's ingrained into us to be a good athlete. And yoga is the contrary. But then you start to see the benefits, and you have to sit and look at yourself, and you have to listen to your breath. And it sucks at first, but then there's like so many rewards that come after that. So
yeah, something else too, and this is definitely linked to ego, and I know that I've experienced this. So say you're holding a plank, for example, which I don't even know if that's an actual yoga posture.
It is. Yeah,
okay.
It is.
Okay. So I remember the first time I tried to hold like a 30-second plank, it was very hard. And this was like when I was actually an athlete. And I was like embarrassed that it was hard. I was like, what's the deal? I can like throw stuff around. I'm like strong, whatever that even means. And then why can't I do this? And so for me, like, I definitely agree with what you're saying. It's slowing down, and it's like this thing that looks stupid and simple is very
Yeah.
hard. Why is it so hard, you know? And so yeah, it's
Yeah.
just such a journey. It's like a definite departure from like loading up a barbell and like ripping it off
Mhm.
the ground kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
I
Which
agree though. It's
which it
go
is
ahead.
like, ripping up a barbell off, and this is not to say that it's wrong at all, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in depth. It's very masculine in nature, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. That's part of us. Part of us is masculine. Problem is that we've strayed from the feminine, which is the softer, the quieter, the stillness, the subtle movements, the conscious movements. And and we need both of those to be the fully functioning operating humans that we are. It is not to say that you can't snatch a barbell, like, but it's like, are we then countering it with balance and surrender and coming to our breath? And then the beautiful thing is, once you do start to incorporate that, the masculine becomes stronger and the feminine becomes stronger. Your ability to snatch the bar with your breath is the most incredible thing in the whole world. But we're not ingrained to sit back and practice those feminine things, right? So then we just throw a barbell unconsciously around, and this is how injury happens. And don't even get me started. So
Oh, I mean, you're not wrong. I mean, and this is this whole conversation can, there can be these generalizations made, and I know we're both trying to avoid that because it's not
yes,
about being like this is bad, this is good, or
totally.
anything. But I do agree that and I was talking to Clara yesterday about this on our live, just about the feminine and the masculine and the imbalance. It's not about getting rid of one. It's about,
Right.
and CrossFit is largely a masculine energy. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's actually like on a personal note, it's been a nice transition to slow down and do the stretching and the yoga
Yeah.
before and after the workout. And it's felt intuitively good. And then knowing also that that's a more feminine energy has been encouraging for me, because I really lean too far in the masculine jock energy. Most of it, it's like
Me too.
I'm comfortable there,
Yep.
or I have been. I'm definitely more like, I'm more balanced, but it's
You
like,
nailed it. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, and it just, I mean, like you were saying, you don't have to have any interest in shapes or anything, but you definitely feel good if you
Yeah.
can get past the struggle of, yes, you have to slow down. You're going to feel amazing. So you mentioned breath work. I'm curious
Mm-hmm.
how you think about this, because I see kind of conflicting, um, maybe not even conflicting. There's different ways to breathe. So something that I've learned, and this is through like Gabby and Laird and their XPT training, they do a lot of pull training, and they really advocate nose breathing. So in and out through the nose. I'm wondering how you feel about breathing, if you should practice different modalities, or yeah.
Okay, so just like yoga, for example, there's different types of breath work that serve at different purposes. But to put it really broadly, and sort of like a rule of thumb, is breathing in and out the nose. Like, you can never go wrong there. Like, that is. I don't know, Jess, if you've ever read James Nestor's book Breath, but for
No,
those
I've
of
heard of, I've
you,
heard of,
oh my God, if you're listening to this and you haven't read that book, read that book.
writing
He's
it
the reason
down.
I tape. Yes, do. He's the reason I tape my mouth shut at night now,
Oh,
because
I love
only
it.
breathing. Yeah, and the insane effects of what occurs when you learn to only breathe through your nose, from athletics to like chronic illness, and even our face shape begins to change when we're mouth breathes. I mean, all these studies that he himself was a part of with Stanford University, in order to really get to the bottom of, and he's just an author, but just to get to the bottom of really understanding the breath. And there's so many breath techniques, and we can even talk about a couple simple ones here in a second. But if you're breathing in and out of your nose, and that's all you ever get from a breath technique, honestly, that's life changing and transforming in
Good.
itself. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it's in the book you're mentioning, but it's just like the physiology of our body is, we're meant to breathe through our nose, and we somehow became mouth breathers.
Yep.
And the analogy I've also heard, I think I heard Joe Rogan talking about this of all people, but he was saying, when you watch a fight and the guy starts mouth breathing, you know that he's done. He's like exhausted. So
Yes.
it's like a last resort fight or flight breathing. It's not like a parasympathetic thing, which I mean, the cool thing
Exactly.
to me about the breath part is that even if you don't do CrossFit, even if you don't even really have an interest in yoga,
Yep.
you're definitely breathing. So you can
Yep.
definitely think about your, even if it's the mouth taping or it's like when you get stressed out or you have 5 minutes to do like some breath practice, like that can apply to anybody.
Yes.
Do you have any, like simple breathing
Yeah.
patterns that you would recommend for people to get started?
Definitely. And I mean, Jeff, you nailed it. Like almost now, I will say in the breath book, he does say, okay, you can breathe, but you're only halfway there if you're not moving with the breath. And so,
Okay.
but if I
That's a good
could
point.
choose one thing, it would be the breath. Like, I mean, think about this really quickly before I show you this technique. Like, literally, our breath determines our life. Literally, if we stop breathing, we die, right? So, the length and the duration of the quality of your breath directly impacts the length, duration, and quality of your life. And
Crazy.
so, and I mean, it's like there literally couldn't be anything more important because, like, the moment we stop breathing, we die. So, like that, and that happens at a slow. It can happen slowly, also, if we just keep breathing
Right.
shallower and shallower. So, speaking of that, most of us, and if you are watching this right now, just check your breath for a second. You're likely only breathing to like the chest area, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And we have been conditioned. So this, like you said, this is an act of the sympathetic nervous system and it's cyclical, right? So as we breathe shorter, the sympathetic nervous system becomes to get on overdrive. And as the sympathetic nervous system gets on overdrive, we breathe shorter. Okay. And so what this tells our body is it's fight or flight time and we need to be on high alert and it sends out stress signals. Our hormones start to go crazy. And what we're doing is we're doing this in every minute of our day. And that's why
Yep.
we have the stress and the anxiety and the disease. So if we can take it back to getting more of a parasympathetic nervous system breath, our breath tells our body how to react or how to be. So it's really as simple. You just place your hands in your lap, or something that's really helpful sometimes is to place your left hand right on your heart, and your right hand's going to come just above the belly button. And you'll seal the lips and just inhale in through the nose, but check to see, can you feel the right hand expanding or can you feel the belly rather expanding the right hand? And honestly, if you do that long enough, it's like a workout in itself.
Mm-hmm.
We are not used to breathing all the way down to the belly and strengthening the diaphragm that in depth. And so it can almost become uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And even the first couple, and so it's as simple as that. And you
Yeah.
work for a couple minutes of breathing all the way down to the lower belly. And the first couple times that I would do this, I was like, I was uncomfortable and I hated it because I was like, this is like uncomfortable. I'm not used to activating all that and breathing all the way down. Like there's not, once it became a practice in my life, there's not a day that I don't use it. There's not a day that I can't use it in any situation that I'm in where I can feel sympathetic nervous system. And if you ever are curious to know what's going on in your subconscious mind at any given time, watch your breath. Your breath will tell you.
Oh my gosh, it is amazing. I I tend to check in with myself several times a day. I mean, that's not even enough, but on my breath. Like if
Yep.
I'm stressed about something, I'm definitely mouth breathing and it's like a shoulder, just like right here breath.
Yes.
It's not like a belly breath. And, I've heard exercise described. I'm glad that you said earlier that it's like, it's not about not moving because that's not good
Mm-hmm.
either.
Right.
But that part of the physiology of why exercise is so powerful for people from every standpoint, from every vantage point, from like mental to like your systems to detoxing all these things is because it's forced breathing. Like
Mm-hmm.
you wouldn't just sit on a couch and breathe deeply and heavy for 30 minutes. So you go run or you go do something for 30 minutes, and part of the benefit is the deep
Yep.
breathing, and you're pumping your body full of oxygen. And yes, it's recruiting your muscles, but that's like I've kind of learned that is just an aspect of it. It's not the biggest part,
Yeah,
which
but
is so cool. Like it just is a reminder that breathing is such a big part of why exercise is powerful. It's not
yes.
all about the tension that you create. Sure, it's part of it, but to just look at that and not look at the breathing is like
It's yeah, you're only getting
this.
half the benefit. And you know what's interesting about that, Jess, is like the reason why I definitely want to say like do not think I'm saying don't move. Okay, so look at these two ends of the spectrum. You have somebody who maybe is like a couch potato, okay?
Yeah.
They have got to, like, if they were to get up and go on a run, it would be hugely beneficial for them for every reason that you just said, from, you know, from the what's
Yeah.
happening in the body to the breath, right? With people that are extreme athletes, our CrossFitters listening to this, us as former athletes, think about this. We can have the exact same result if we go too far on the other end, right? So you have the couch potatoes who sits in sympathetic nervous system because he doesn't know how to breathe because nothing's enticing him to breathe deep. And then you have the extreme athlete who's in sympathetic nervous system because they're taxing their system too much. So this movement is there's a fine line in there, and you can definitely train yourself to get more and more movement. Like that's what this athletics and CrossFit and everything is all about. But it's like
Totally.
that's why the breath technique is useful if you're a couch potato or if you are a, you know, if you're a couch potato, you want to really start to activate the breath. If you are an extreme athlete, you're learning to bring yourself down back into parasympathetic nervous system so that you can recover. So that's why it's
Yeah.
beneficial for both ends.
And yeah, that's a great remind. It's just it's stuff we know. First of all, we know
Yeah.
that we can over and underdo stuff, and then also just the fact that you're kind of bringing up that you can breathe certain ways to elevate your energy, and then you can breathe certain ways to like down regulate. And
Yep.
so it's just such a useful tool that we're not. You have to like search for this information, right? It's not like
Right.
we were brought up with it, and so the fact that it's such a vital part of our life, and I'm in my 30s now, like I'm just now discovering this. I'm like, there's so much lost time,
I know.
but better late than never. But
Never. Yes. Yes.
okay, so I want to talk a little bit more about energy,
Yeah.
and so I'll kind of make a comment and then you can kind of run with it. So I
Yeah.
think something interesting about energy is that a lot of people categorize it as very like woo woo, and I don't believe in that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like really far out. That's
Yeah.
like, it's just not my belief system, even, I think people will say. But I think the interesting thing is that there is science behind energy work. And
Mm-hmm.
those people that would be doubtful of energy because they think it's woo woo, it's like, well, there's science. And then they're
Yeah.
open to the science.
Right.
So it's just an interesting thing of um, people have different ways of maybe arriving at it. And it's like, so you can say, hey, Mariah does energy healing, or I know somebody that does energy healing, and they're like, okay, great, what is that?
Yeah.
Versus you saying, hey, there's, the quantum entanglement is like
It's a
there's just so
thing.
many. Oh my gosh, well, I'm struggling because it's a rabbit hole, but there are like physics, like laws in
Mm-hmm.
physics that are related to energy. And so when you
Yep.
say that, people are like, oh yeah, that's a fact. That's
Yeah.
factual. But
Yeah.
for some reason, energy is in this, at least from my sphere, maybe it's different in your spot, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not taken seriously. And part of that is because we're very much in the Western medicine mental framework. But
Yep. Yeah.
do you run into that a lot, or do you find that the people that you work with they're already on that page, and you don't have to do any kind of, I don't want to say
So
educating, but yeah.
right, yeah. So, well, first of all, kind of two-part answer there. Because I've tapped into energy so much, I just attract people that are already
Mm-hmm.
into it, and that's like simply put, you know. But let's talk about the science, because whether or not you believe this blindly without the science or not, it's an important part of this. And so,
Yeah.
you know, to put it like really simply, it's like, okay, so if you look at a table, for example, and you know that that table is matter. And so we, at one time in our existence, thought that the atom was the smallest form of matter possible until the day came along when we realized we could split the atom. And of course, I always say this is like such a perfect analogy that that also happened to create the atomic bomb. Well, it created the atomic bomb in a lot of ways, and it blew things wide open. And it what it showed us was that, oh my gosh, there was something smaller than the atom. And where this was the birth of quantum physics, and this is where we started to realize, like, not only is there something smaller than the atom, but those particles behave differently. they behave differently than our laws of physics. And this was the birth of quantum physics. And but how could they be any different if they are the very things that make up the atom, right? And so what has happened is it's not that this is some woo-woo information. It just hasn't been publicized. It just hasn't been taught. And don't even get me started on that topic of why
Oh
it's not
yeah.
been taught. But so and then so okay, so at the very end, even when you strip away what's called like quarks and stuff that make up an atom, all of these molecular components, we just get energy. At the end of it all, it's just energy. And our first law of thermodynamics is energy can neither be created or destroyed. And so but it's not a matter of is this energy thing real? It's have you learned to tap into it? And have you learned enough about it to tap into it? Because I'm an energy worker, but all I am is a human being who's owned it. Every single one of us is an energy worker if they choose to be, if they choose to tap into these subtle energies and these subtle frequencies. All I have done is I've studied. It's like saying like I could never learn math. Yes, you could. It's just you haven't
Yeah.
studied, you know? And so that's all, I always tell people like people are like, oh my gosh, you know how to see energy? I'm like, yeah, you do too. You just gotta learn how, you know?
That's amazing. I mean, you don't give yourself enough credit, but I do appreciate what you're saying, that
Thank you.
it's not, you're kind of like, hey, I'm not special. I mean, I
Yeah.
believe that you're special, but you're like, this gift is not unique to me necessarily, which
Yeah,
is
it's
even
not.
more powerful than you saying, yes, I'm the only one that
Right, right.
gets this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And you know, and just like kind of one more thing on that is like it's not to say that people aren't a little bit more predispositioned. Like for whatever reason I came into this life with this quest to want to know more. And some people don't, and that's okay. There's a place for that. And maybe some people only needed to come into this life for me to do energy work, and that's all they need in their life. And they don't have to be a quantum physician to know anymore. And that's okay. That's
yeah.
the role we all play. So, but it doesn't mean that I have these special abilities only gifted to me, you know? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So this is going to be a little bit sciencey, but I
Okay.
mentioned quantum entanglement before because it's one of the theories that I learned about that is like the most impactful, and I learned about
Mm-hmm.
it through a guy named Greg Braden.
Ah,
Who,
yes.
do you know Greg
Love.
Braden?
Yes,
Okay,
I
so
own like
he's
all
in.
of his books.
Oh, okay, good. My dad and I nerd out on Greg Braden, but
Yes.
he's been in. I think he's been in. He's definitely been in the Heal documentary. He's been
Mm-hmm.
in like what the bleep do we know? I think his
Yep.
work is like amazing, but he does a great job of explaining it and kind of, and you can correct me or jump in if I'm misrepresenting it, but
Mm-hmm.
so to me it actually is important because it's related to sending somebody good vibes or praying for somebody or sending them your good thoughts. Quantum entanglement is the theory that because these particles were once one, even though they are now in two different spots in the universe, they're still connected.
Yeah.
So I've like basically grown to believe that, and again, there's like science behind this. It's just not like a convenient belief
Right.
that when you're like, it sounds cute to say, but there's actually science behind it. It's a like a law in physics, I think is the right way to say it. But essentially, when you're thinking of somebody, you are sending them that energy and it's felt. Like
Yep.
I truly, I know I'm like saying this to the right person, you get that. But to some
Mm-hmm.
people, they don't think it's real. You know what I mean?
Yep.
They think that they're just like, oh, thanks for thinking of me, but
Right.
that doesn't reach me. You didn't get me a physical gift.
Right.
So I would love to hear what your thoughts are on that and how much that kind of comes into the work you do. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So for sure, and just to give a brief description of quantum entanglement for anybody who's listening, quantum entanglement, like Jess said, it's really the idea that two particles that were once one are now separate, but they're still entangled with each other. And there's literally been studies, and in Greg Braden's book, I think it's The Divine Matrix, he does a study where like he'll have somebody watch a movie and he'll watch how their DNA or their cells are responding to the movie that they're watching. Then he'll take the cells out of them and place the cells beside them, have them watch the movie. The cells are still responding the same way. And then they keep moving the cells further and further and further away across the world. And the cells are still reacting as if they're in the body, right? And the same thing has happened with all of humanity and each other. And so we are all connected. And like, you literally cannot think, energy does not have any bounds. It has a ripple effect. It never stops. And so because we are quantumly entangled, energy is boundless, and therefore the moment that I choose to tap into your energy, or I choose to even, and by that I mean just simply thinking of you or whatever, there is a frequency that is sent, there is a vibration sent your way. And it's oftentimes, we see it when we hear people say like, so Jess calls me and I was just thinking about her. Well, that's what happens, right? But the problem is that we have been taught to not tap into that, whether it's through, some of our strict religious or whatever the reason is, just government, the globe, whatever. And there's, it's like it's because it's a very, very, very powerful thing to be able to pick up on that. It's very powerful, very meaningful.
It sounds like too good to be true, I think, for some people.
Yes.
But so without, getting too much into that, I guess my final thought on that is just that, if you think about what you currently believe, like you meaning anybody that will watch this, you have a belief system, right? And you believe those things. They are firmly, like, them to be true. I think that can really rattle people if they hear information like this and then it conflicts with these beliefs they have. They're like, well, I was brought up in, this kind of family or this kind of spiritual dynamic or religious dynamic or whatever. It could be 100 different flavors of how you established your belief system.
Yeah.
It's just so disruptive for them to consider a new possibility that I think it just bounces off of a lot of people, and they don't ever, it doesn't sink in. And so I fortunately was just receptive to it. And I'm really grateful for that. And especially in a time where, the last year and a half year of our lives has looked a lot different. We're away from people more. It actually has been really powerful for me to think about how I can focus on the people I'm thinking about and send them my good energy and know that it's making it to them. I mean, I think that's, if I use the word prayer, I think that would be more accepted, right? Can you please pray for me?
Yes.
And that's like an accepted thing, and people believe that. And first of all, it's words. A lot of it is just words. You put that word on it, cool. It's the same
thing.
Yeah, totally. So
that's why, like, I used to get like hung up on like, well, don't you know that prayer? This is what I'm talking about. Like, and at the end, I've just realized that, like, honestly, it's first of all, it's not my job to bring people kicking and screaming into any sort of reality, and that their truth is still very much their truth, and it's not wrong at all. It's not any more right or wrong than my truth is for me. And you're right. It's like, but when you can help people understand that, like, I'm not this like woo-woo like person that like thinks that like my hands are magic or anything, that like you're saying the same thing. And some people say, oh, I'm gonna send you a prayer. Some people say, I'm gonna send you good vibes. Some people say like, oh, I'm gonna, I'll do energy work on you. Whatever it is, it's just energy.
Yeah. I think that, if I'm honest, I think that comes from a defensiveness that I've felt, because I know that certain things are looked at like, they're just understood. And then there's other categories where if you say I'm sending you good vibes, it's like, what are you, like a hippie? And like, that's not the right thing. You know what I mean? But it is just words, and it's our associations with words. And that's a whole nother, like, we get disconnected because we get hung up on words,
Yes.
And like you're saying, it's all energy though. It's all good energy. So why categorize and create this separateness or illusion of separateness through, just labeling ourselves and putting ourselves in different categories? Like, well, like, what's your belief system kind of thing? It's like, we're energy. You can't like ignore ignore that part of it. So.
Exactly. Like, at the end of the day, what you're saying and I'm saying has energy, frequency. What your beliefs are is an energy. The mosque at which you go in to worship is an energy. The church that you go into is an energy. And that really provides us a foundation to stand on common ground, you
Yeah.
know? So, yeah.
Okay, so another question that kind of I just thought of this just from like an everyday perspective, right? Because you obviously juggle a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, from your both of your businesses to the people that you come into contact with. What's like, I guess, walk us through a day as far as like how what your relationship is with energy throughout the day. Is it subconscious for you at this point, or are you is it more in your conscious mind of like, you know, and I guess work aside, so when you're doing sessions,
Mm-hmm.
like not including that,
Yeah.
how do you look at energy throughout your day? Are you like hyper aware of like when you like walk into a grocery store and you see this guy that's like in a really bad, are you just like super
Mm-hmm.
like analyzing people? Is it like that, or are you able to yeah, I'm just wondering what happens in your brain knowing how like into it you
Mm-hmm.
are and your understanding is. Yeah.
Yes, yes. I'll give you a kind of a briefer of even how I've developed in that way. When I started to, really tap into energy, it was like, for one, it was exhausting,
Yeah.
because I could, take on other people's energy, pick up at other people's energy, which we actually do all the time. All of us do. But when you're hyper aware or hypersensitive to it, then it's like even more impactful. And so I used to take on a lot as I walked through life. And sometimes I couldn't even name it. Like it might be Bob over here at the grocery store who's having a really rough day. And all of a sudden I feel like shit, like, so, but now it has turned into so much more of an observation. And I can't tell you how much the breath has helped with that, which is almost another story. But there's been two things that I use to go throughout my day. Yes, if I want to, and if I am focused and concentrated, I could really just about tell you anything that's going on in somebody's life. And I don't mean to say that as like my friends who are watching this will laugh because they know that's the truth. And I don't mean to say that like as bragging or anything, but I could. But
Oh yeah.
it's turned into so much more of like an observation from the standpoint of like, and not that I only look at the pain in people either. There's like plenty of good things, but I'll use like kind of the pain in people as an example. It's really come into like like I can see he's experiencing pain, and I know that because I experience pain too. And so like the way in which I can kind of connect with it is like I can identify what somebody's going through, but it doesn't take from me anymore, and it doesn't I don't have to assess it and everything anymore because it's become a little bit more of an observation, like how interesting. And
Yeah.
trust me, I used to be like, oh my God, his energy is like, oh, I just feel so sad. And I can get there if I want to, but I've really learned, but it's helped me like in business, for example, like when you can read the energy of a room, like how much that can help you in making, what to say next in a business meeting or quite honestly, I can't tell you how many times I've told people this where like I will go into the production facility and I'll just say a prayer or send good vibes to every single person that's making my juice and every single thing that's going into that juice. And because energy is boundless, you better believe that that impacts my juice,
Oh my
So just
gosh.
things like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I just got
Yeah.
like goosebumps.
No.
Um, so yeah, oh my gosh, there's so much to that. I really like that you're able, because that does seem like it'd be overwhelming if you're reading energy all day and you just are picking up all these frequencies from people.
Yeah.
So, are there any common threads? Like what's an energy that you maybe notice a lot? Maybe we can start just with women. Like, is there a common energy that we hang on to that maybe inhibits us that you find like comes up a lot?
Yes, and I can speak to this because this was an energy about me that I carried for so long. And I would say I almost want to extend it beyond women. It's the biggest thing I see can be traced back to a lack of self-love for
Mm,
yourself, or love for yourself at all. And that comes in so many forms, right? But really it can be traced back to that. And well, I would say there's two things: a lack of self-love and an inability to surrender. Those are the two things that I think clog us as humans. And then like you can put all of these um, external factors on why somebody is the way like is the way they are. And it's like, okay, well, maybe their dad abused them, for example. Well, from that came a lack of self-love or a belief, so then you carry that, even though the dad's not abusing anymore. And even though we could target that as like, there it was, like, there is the problem, it's a lack of self-love from life's circumstances. And what happens when you become more aware of yourself through the breath
Mm-hmm.
and through conscious movement is you start to realize that that was a lie, and that like that outside has no bearing on you. So I would say that's number one that I see almost all the time. And also this innate ability, or a need, I should say, to control life. And let me tell you, I say that, and I probably I would bet money that I was the worst culprit of that than anybody listening to this podcast or to this at all. I was the worst at it, especially as athletes. It's a very, it's a tendency in athletes. And it's not that you're a controlling person as far as like you tell people what to do, but like you constantly worry or want things to be different in life. And so instead of just fully surrendering to what life is, I would say that those are the two biggest things that cause disharmony and dis-ease in not women in particular, I would say, because we tend to be a little bit more emotionally inclined, but humanity in general.
Yeah. Wow. So this
Yeah.
is a loaded question, but okay, so how do I start loving myself more? I know that mentioned basically getting back in touch with yourself, reconnecting to yourself through breath
Yeah.
work, through yoga, through movement.
Yeah.
Is there like, are we missing anything? What if somebody starts doing that and they don't feel reconnected? Do they need to just stay the path, or are they?
I would say well, yes, stay the path for sure. It does take some time. But the third component to that is acceptance, I would say. And, we're so much taught. This is something I've been on big time in the last couple of months as I'm working through some of my internal stuff. And boy, have I been on a journey this past couple of weeks, especially. But uh, we tend to think like, even the thought of like, oh, I don't love myself, then that creates another problem. It's okay that you don't love yourself at this moment. It's okay. Like, accept that. Like, look it in the eye. It's okay. And then, because if you think about it, like, even if I tell you like, hey, I'm picking up that you really don't love yourself, then it's like, oh my God, I suck because I don't even love myself. Like, we just perpetuate the problem.
Yeah.
It's like accepting the fact that you don't love yourself. It's okay. It's literally okay. It's okay. And
Yeah.
then we're taking that and seeing if you can transcend it to something else. Remember, energy is neither created or destroyed. It only changes form, right? So this goes back to what we were talking about. So taking a notion, accepting it, allowing that notion to embody you fully. I don't love myself. Wow, I really don't love myself. Then figuring out ways through breath, conscious movement, gratitude, journaling, all these things I tell my clients, to then transcend that. And it's a slow process and it comes and goes. But it's the beauty of that journey, and accepting that journey fully, that's when the transformation takes place.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think the acceptance thing is big. And also you mentioning that, as rooted as you can get and as confident as you can get, I think just incrementally in my life, I've, even if it's by small bits, there's still, and this just means I personally still have work to do. Somebody can still throw a comment at me that is just like, I mean, triggering is too used of a word, but maybe it's because I believe it to be true somewhere within me. So it's like too close to home.
Mm-hmm.
I can't really think of an example, but like a criticism basically.
Yep.
And it can still like derail me. And I'm sure maybe we all have that a little bit. How do you, is it as simple as going back to your practice? I know it sounds simple, but I think that the consistency obviously is the hard part of it.
Right.
When you go off track and you get derailed by a comment or an experience, is it like, what's your route back? Is it just through your practice? You just go back to that? Yeah.
So of course, there's always, no matter what that answer is, there's always going to be a component of devotion. So I'm going to get that out of the way first. Like, if you want to learn how to be a volleyball player and then you just go and you hit the ball one time and you're like, this doesn't work. Well, everything takes practice. And so that's why it's called yoga practice. Like, we practice yoga, right? Or we practice breath work. And so I'm going to kind of, again, break this down into sort of three components that I go through. I'm working a lot with my own personal triggers. And so this has been something that has been on my mind a lot lately. Going back to the cliche breath, the first thing you do is slow down the breath, because if you're in a short breath, then you will react. And I want you to think about the word, the reaction, right? It's like they say something and you might say something right back, or you will get triggered with it and it's like, like you're just as riled up as they were when they said it, right? And so we have a reaction occur. If you slow down the breath into parasympathetic nervous system, you give yourself time to respond. And really, if you take the word respond, it means respondability, responsibility, right? So then what I have done lately, and people think, oh yeah, like you don't really do this. No, yes, I do. If I have a criticism, I can feel it, right? Pain strikes, I feel that. All right, first thing I do is I slow down my breath. Second thing is I try to go back. All right, where is the trigger coming from? So let's say like, oh, she shouldn't have posted that. Like that's showing too much skin. Okay, so if that triggers you, there is self-love issues that have not been overcome yet. And it's talking about self-love gets pretty deep, so you can use these like experiences to help you understand that. Oh, I remember in a time in college athletics, like when I was in my swimming suit and I looked at all these girls and they were ripped and I wasn't. And then I remember a time before that in high school when all these girls were getting boobs and I wasn't, or whatever that case is. You can go back and 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 you can assess like, where is this coming from? And
Yeah.
you hear like this, like you hear about people who like stop caring what other people think. And I used to think that that was like a lie, but I can
Yeah.
tell you, like, when you take those steps to respond, go back to where the trigger is, because the trigger is not coming from them, it's coming from within you. And so once you can see where the trigger is, those type of comments become like, when you work through your own issues, those type of comments almost become laughable because you're not affected by them anymore. And that's a real thing. It actually
Yeah.
happens. And I used to think, oh bullshit, no, it happens. That train yourself to be that way. It can happen. So that's kind of the process I take with that.
I'm gonna do that. Like that's amazing.
Yeah.
What was I gonna say as we were talking? Oh, so I think that that's one of the reasons that's so helpful is because what I think most of us do, I'll just speak for myself and maybe somebody else does this too.
Mm-hmm.
When I hear something negative about myself, and it doesn't happen often, right? But that's like
Mm-hmm.
when you get 100 nice things, you remember the one mean
The
thing,
one. Yeah.
that kind of thing. So say I hear something mean or critical about myself, I, instead of doing what you're saying, so like slowing down my breath, tracing back to where that trigger is, which same with an athletic background, there's plenty of body,
Yeah.
figuring out your body as a girl growing up in sports especially, there's a lot
Yeah.
of potential
Yes.
lessons and traumas there. But I first will go to, well, is that true? Is that I don't give myself the benefit of the doubt. I'm like quicker to go, oh yeah, they're probably right, I suck, or whatever the
Yes.
thing is. And it's like, then when you look at my response to that, it's kind of crazy how one comment could make me turn against myself for a moment instead of having my own back and then like being introspective and like you're saying, tracing it back. And I don't know where that really bad habit comes from, but it is so like corrosive. I mean,
Oh my God.
I do agree with you. The more that you um the repetition of that, which in a way, every negative comment is a rep. So it's a chance for you to practice your technique with dealing with it, even though you're like, wow, again, another mean comment.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
I would definitely take it as like, wow, I guess I'm not perfect yet. I'm still getting mean comments, like stuff like that. But it's
Right.
like, no, it's a gift. It's you going, it's the universe going, here's another
It's a
rep.
gift. Oh my gosh, this is why I love talking to you. I mean, this has like been my whole, like, this is another gift for you. And if people, I'm studying the gene keys right now. If no one's heard of the gene
Oh,
keys, they talk about moving from the
no.
shadow to the, oh, Jess, we'll talk about that. We'll talk
Okay,
about
we'll
the,
do another like live in a
yeah,
couple months.
yeah,
Like we'll have new material.
right, material, right. So they talk about moving from the shadow to the gift, and realizing that that is an opportunity for you to find a gift. That is an
Mm,
opportunity for you to find a gift within yourself. And like you said, I love that you said, you don't have your own back enough. And that comes from a lack of self-love, right? Because all can be traced
Totally.
back to self-love. And then also too, if you have 100 great comments and one bad, it's like we're so like prone to looking at the bad. Switch to the 100 great ones instead. Like,
Yeah.
Harvard did a study, and we have around 95,000 thoughts a day. 80% of those 95,000 thoughts are self-deprecating. And so it's like we've got to learn to change that pattern. And the only way to change the pattern is to put in the work to change the pattern. It's hard. It sucks that we're predispositioned to that. And I don't know that anybody really knows why, except for that there's like this original wound of separation that I will get into. But like it's like we're there, and now we've got to find our way back out of that, or we're going to end up where we're going.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I think
Yeah.
kind of a concluding thought is just like we all have self-love issues, and I'm not saying
Yep.
that like conveniently to say like I'm not the only one, but the more people I talk to in my life, the more I know that we all have things we struggle with, and we're all just figuring it out. Like it's not like you have
Yep.
a problem, like you're saying, don't compile the things, oh I suck because I don't love myself right now. No, let's not go that way.
Right.
It's all about being nicer to yourself essentially.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I don't know if we're
exactly.
gonna get cut off here because I actually
Been an
don't know
hour.
how this works. I think you might get cut off at an hour.
Okay, I think so too. But it's all good. I mean, actually, I think I've gone over an hour before, but I know pretty soon here our time's going to be up. So
It'll wrap it up. Hopefully, it would
yeah.
give you like some kind of
Like a warning, like you guys have 30 more
Yeah.
seconds. Yeah.
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 Well, this was great. I know it was a little bit spitball style, but I mean, there's a lot to talk about with honestly all of our like common interests and
Yes.
really energy you could talk about all day. But I feel like we did hopefully a decent job at kind of like talking
Hopefully,
about a
because
lot
Jess,
of things.
I'm so grateful for you because like I don't really know anybody else in the whole world that I can talk to about quantum entanglement and put it in a palatable way, right? So
Same. Well, they would just categorize me as like, oh, she either is a science nerd, which is so far from that. I'm not a science nerd.
same.
I just love the universe and life and learning.
Yep.
And so I agree. You're like the only human who I could talk about a lot of this with. And you would like actually be excited. Most people would be like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. Well, hopefully we've given some people a new insight, right, about
I know.
it now.
I hope so. And we'll do this again, and we'll give everybody a heads up, and we can maybe we can collect some feedback on what people want to hear other humans talk about. So
I love it.
Yay.
All right. Well, thanks for having
for
me
your
on,
time.
and I'll see you soon.
Love you.
I love you. Bye.